They say the average recruiter spends 6 to 7 seconds reviewing a resume before either accepting or rejecting an applicant. How can they move so quickly? What are they looking for? And how can you surface it better? That's what I'm talking about today with my junior developer guest, Courtney Azar, a new Android engineer who was previously in the Army before changing careers into software development. So, Courtney, when we were talking earlier, you mentioned you were starting to find success when you started tailoring your resume for each role. What types of changes were you making, and what did you learn through that process?
Yeah, so I think a lot of what worked for me was making sure that I was writing my resume for the role that I wanted, not the one that I had. I come from a non-linear background in tech. And so that means that, I haven't been doing this my whole career. And it takes a little bit of explaining at the interview process to get to, well, why are you applying for a software engineer job if all you did was the army? And so I find it a lot easier to tailor the resume towards not only the job I'm going for, particularly for like the stack that I'm learning, right? So, like for instance, the stack that I applied for may have had, a bunch of JavaScript, HTML, CSS. And so, if I'm applying for a job that requires all that, I better list out the experience I have with those skills, right? But also, I need to say a little bit more about, you know, why my role in the military lends to that, right? Or why my past experience lends to this role as well. And rather than saying, something about the military or adding a bunch of military jargon for me, which never really got me interviews, it made job recruiters, and everybody else seem to kind of be standoffish in that moment. Like, what is this? What you worked with this named tank or you worked with this named helicopter. I've never heard of these things before. Do you want to explain that? And then half of my interview time was I've talked about the military and nothing about what my experience has lent. So instead, I'd say I have, experience as a manager. I have experience as, being dedicated to a specific task or having worked in computers in that task, right? I worked in Excel or I worked in, something that was somewhat relevant to the job that I was going for. So not only did they see, oh, you worked in the military, that's kind of cool, but they also saw the skills that I brought from that experience they could roll forward. So my advice to any of the, junior developers I've helped in the past has always been whatever your job is now, don't write your resume for now. Write your resume for the job you want. And so if your job is going to be a software engineer, writing down that you can run real fast in a ruck march, right? Or that you can work the fryer at McDonald's, those are important skills for those jobs, but it's not relevant to the job you're going for. So tailor that more towards, I have dedication to a team or I work closely with dangerous equipment or, things of that nature that might be more relevant to why you want to field in
Yeah, and a
tech
lot of
now. So that's
the
my
good
suggestion.
suggestions. Some of the examples that you pointed out, you mentioned like talking to the recruiter and being able to have that opportunity to spend, a few minutes to explain your story. The resume is a lot more concise though. You don't have an opportunity to really explain this, holistic life story. So, like specifically, how did you customize each line item to not like ignore what you've done, but reframe it? Can you give me some like more specific examples?
Yeah. So for instance, one aspect of being a software engineer is working in an agile environment. And agile at its basic level is being able to do continuous integration, continuous development, right? And so yeah, I pretty much wrote that I have experience in an agile environment because in my experience in the military, we work on these training schedules that are, a calendar year long. And so being able to put together the training schedule and update it as we went along, it was an agile process, right? And so I worked in an agile process in that sense, right? Or maybe you can use your experience in, a life cycle model, right? And so the life cycle of the training schedule is something that I worked within, managed on a daily basis. I managed a budget for training, right? And that budget lent to coming around to meeting the budget standards for the rest of the year, right? things of that nature where you can, kind of put it towards more of a project manager kind of experience as opposed to, you worked in the military, because that doesn't make sense to a recruiter. But a project manager, they know what that is, right? So if you look at some examples online of, well, what experience are they looking for in a project manager? They'll tell you, the
Hmm.
SDLC, right? The life cycle of your deployments, right? Your CI/CD pipeline being, beholden to a budget, and your product owners, right? Or your product folks. And so my product folks in the military were potentially my first sergeant, or, other people that had tasks that needed to be done by me or my team. And so when you look at it that way, it's easier to translate your skills in something that's a readable format for a recruiter. And I find it, a lot of people, are like, well, that's, now I'm writing about things that, are way off base. I didn't do that in the military. And it's like, well, but you did. We're phrasing it differently so that it's transferable to what we're talking
Yes,
about right now. Because the recruiter we're talking to, or, the manager we're going to talk to, they don't know what we're,
it's
military
knowing
terms
your
are.
audience, and
So
to say it a little bit differently, you're just abstracting your day to day, and you're creating metaphors that are easily understood by your target audience. It's not a lie. It's
exactly.
storytelling. I mean, it's marketing. And I typically say at some point you're probably good enough as a developer, and you need to focus less on perhaps coding and focus more on learning how to market yourself a little more effectively. I think that's a good example of it.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say like, "Oh, I was the expert Python developer for my team." That's going too
Sure.
far.
Yes.
But trying to explain how the agile process of, our military system, and, potentially how that works within the development system, those are pretty equidistant. You know what I mean? We can say, I understand agile now because I've spoken about it on a grander
Mhm.
scale, right? If you can talk about it on a higher level, then chances are you understand it pretty well. And so make sure you understand what you're referencing, right? Don't just throw in catchy SDLC. Yeah, yeah. Somebody said that once. And CICD. Ooh, I saw that on a resume once. Understand what it is you're referencing. But if you can equate the work that you did towards, managerial experience, or, um, you know, things of that nature, where maybe you didn't necessarily have the title for it, but you did the work of it, right? There's a lot of people who fill the needs of the company in a certain time, even if that is, you were an hourly wage worker at, say, a construction company, and they needed somebody to do suddenly scheduling. Well, you did, scheduling, and you monitored the development life cycle of that project.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And so it's important to know what you're talking about, what you're trying to equate or reference, but it's also important to stay true to what you actually did, right? So don't make up
Yes.
things, right? But at the same time, it's sometimes hard to explain to the tech folks what your past experience really taught you. And so this is a good tool for
So an
that.
example that you shared was this fry cook example, and how if you're applying for a job as a software engineer, your current job that you put on your resume should not be, fry cook at McDonald's. So what would you put
Right.
as your current job title, or even the job title of previous roles then?
Yeah, and I think, junior developer, or you can even say student, right? If it's something that you're learning currently, you can say I'm a software engineer student, or I'm you know, aspiring software engineer, something of that nature. But in terms of like, should I just write, I'm a fry cook. These are the tasks, the daily tasks that are written in my job description. I think that that's not going to get you the attention that you want. The attention that you're looking for from a recruiter is going to be, I right now I'm an aspiring or a student software engineer, right? And they might ask you questions. That will probably get you a question, but it gets you in the interview, and it gets you the opportunity to explain. Yes, I currently work as a fry cook, and that's under my experience. But all of the skills that I've learned, those should be somewhere at the top of your resume. I'm learning Python currently. I'm learning Android development currently. Whatever it is you're working on, put that under your skills, and they'll look at it and go, "Wow, you have all these skills, but you currently, the only experience you have is a fry cook. Can you explain? well, this is my first career in tech. This is what I'd like to do. And you can put down a bit of experience that's your student experience as well. I think a lot of people sell that short where I just have to write what I'm doing now or what I did in the past, and it's not relevant at all to what you're going for. If you've been to a boot camp, if you've been learning online at home, everything that you have put on your GitHub, right, or anywhere else that you've got a project going, you can write that in there and put a link. And, recruiters will go check that out and look and see what you've done. Some managers will go look at that and be like, wow, well, you did actually do these things. So if you do put your GitHub link or some other file that you've got out there, make sure that you're actually filling it with important data you want them to look at. Don't leave projects undone or open or things like that. Listen to what I say, not to what I do. But I think at the end of the day, what's really great is just knowing that, you've got your experience out there, you've got your skills, and those are going to lend more to a junior developer role than leaving those off and just saying, these are my past experiences. Well, your past experiences don't tell me what you're capable of. Now, you've learned a lot between now and then. You learned these skills. You went to this boot camp. You have all of this. So put it on your resume that these are things I'm working towards even, my future skills, future goals, right? You can write all of that on your resume. It's yours, right? It's your experience. What do you want to share with the world and your future employer? And I think a lot of people get hung up on, well, no, they want it in a certain format. And yes, that's absolutely true. Keep in mind, people read top to bottom, left to right. So important stuff on
Mhm.
this side. But you also should keep in mind that this is your resume and you're telling people who you are and why I want to
Yeah.
work with you. And so if it's all just, I did this and I did this and I did this and I have these skills, that's also not telling me if I want to
Well, let
work with you.
me.
It's okay to put some.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to get your thoughts then.
Right.
Yeah, I
Well,
want to
go
get your
ahead.
thoughts on this then. So first, I just want to say I absolutely agree that if a recruiter pulls up your profile and the first thing that they see is not relevant, a job title not relevant to the role they're hiring for, then they're going to move on. In a world right now where we have hundreds, thousands of applicants to every entry level role, that's just part of the game. They get a few hundred, and that's just unrealistic for them to spend any real substantive amount of time to follow up and probe more. And their goal at that point is to cut people out of the pool so they can limit it to a reasonable number, maybe 10, 20, maybe 30. So anyway, so that first entry has to be something relevant to the role. I think we agree on that.
Right.
I would suggest to not say something like junior developer or even aspiring developer for that first role. I think you can just put, React engineer. Or you can put the actual title that you are. Because from my experience, most people aren't looking for, they're just looking for programmers. Uh, and as far as if you're a junior, you're a mid, you're a senior, well, let the recruiter in the interview process kind of figure that out. So I wouldn't necessarily sell yourself short. Um, and then as far
Yep.
as what, should you put that under work experience? I would say yes. You can, at least in the state of Texas, for example, have a sole proprietorship, DBA, LLC for relatively cheap, and you can put your own company, or you can build something for a nonprofit, maybe a small business owner, family member, and put their company as as the work experience, and contractor or something, freelancer. But the idea is that you can go and create your own experience that you put in that work experience section. You don't have to wait for somebody to pay you to do it. Courtney, just a quick example for myself, and this was a few decades ago, but I'm only bringing it out because it sounds like it's still relevant today. I mean, side note, part of the reason why I interview recently hired junior developers is I feel like a lot of folks that bring up, well, back in my day, all I did was, all that advice is hogwash, right? The market is so much different, but this is relevant. The first tech experience that I put on my resume was a 4-hour a week unpaid internship where I was doing mostly like
Wow.
content updates, front end SEO updates, updating tags and, that type of thing. But it was technically front end and it was technically work I was doing for another company. So I was a front end developer. 4 hours a week doesn't even qualify as a part time job, but it was something that I could put on a resume and I did. So seek these type of
Yeah.
opportunities out. But I want to get your thoughts on, not putting junior there. Uh, am I stepping over the line?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I didn't want to be the one to say, "Hey, go out and write, software engineer." I think if you are even doing it on the side, right? It's, you do that 9 to 5 job in the morning, and then at night you're maybe building a website, even that just, shows your resume. You know what I mean? You are developing. You're a front end, back end, whatever it is that you're working on. That's that's who you are. That's what you're doing. Because at the end of the day, software engineers, the only difference between, hey, I've got a job doing this and hey, I don't is, a contract. But ultimately, if you're doing the work during the day and you're comfortable putting that, hey, I am a software engineer. I have these skills. I mean, when I was going to my boot camp, I wrote in there right there, I'm a software engineer and these are my skills at my boot camp right now, and the boot camp specifically said it was a boot camp, but my role in that boot camp was I'm working as a software engineer, getting, on the job training to become a software engineer. So I would say to anybody that's, interested in doing, that on their resume, great. The other thing I really want to say is there's a lot of folks that are in college right now that are going to get a 4-year degree in computer software engineering, right? And they're going to go out into the job market and they're going to put on their resume that they are a computer software engineer. Have they ever worked in the field? Have they ever built a full application before? Have they ever deployed a full application before? No. But they're going to put that title on their resume all because they went to school for it. Now, if you went to a boot camp and did the exact same thing, why is it any different? You should get that title too because you've been working as one. And I guarantee the folks that are actually developing their own GitHub repos, actually going out and making websites for themselves or other friends, working in internships that are unpaid right now. If you're actually doing the work of that, I'd say even if you don't have a company behind that right now, you can leave the company portion blank. And when the interviewer goes to ask you, you can say, look, I'm working as an engineer right now. And one of the tricks I used to do is I would have one of my deployed applications that's out there on a website right now. I would pull it up and have it ready to go. So when I'm doing these interviews, I just share my screen real quick and be like, here, look, I made this application, right? And I'm scrolling through the application and showing them all the cool features. Don't ask for permission to do that either. Just do it. And then the recruiter will be like, wow, that is really cool.
Yeah, assuming the
So
UI
a
looks
lot of
really
this
good.
is,
Yeah, if it's crap, be
yes,
careful.
yes. Yeah. I would say look into Material UI, but know how to update the themes so that you can
Sure, yeah.
make it your own. And it doesn't just look like a mooey website.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So, but yeah, if you have the ability to make a really cool website, or if you created one for a local pet shelter, or whatever it is that you've done, even just to host your resume somewhere, and that can be a great resource too, a learning experience for you, figuring out how to deploy a full app out there, and it's just showing your resume. That would be really
Because
cool,
really, I mean,
and so
oh, so I was because really at the end of the day, there's nothing substantively different than you iterating on a personal project versus you working on a uh, that's pet store app for a family friend. They might you might
right,
technically be writing the exact same code for your personal project versus this work that you're doing for that pet store, but only the pet store one you can put as work experience, technically. So the only thing that separates that is a contract that you have. Um, and
right.
yeah,
Well, and if we look at the Wordle guy for a minute, right? The guy that went and wrote Wordle, he never had any job experience. He wrote an arguably very poorly written
yeah.
app and he got a few $1,000,000. He's one of the best known software engineers in the world. He wrote one app one
And
time. That's it. Now, I don't know what he's done since,
I hopefully
but
retired
I
and
mean, if
spent
that's
some time on a beach for a while. He deserved it. But the great thing about software engineering is that there is less regulation in the sense that I'm pretty sure you'd get in trouble if you called yourself a lawyer, if you didn't have a law degree, right? Or a doctor, if you didn't actually go to medical school. But for software engineering, I mean,
right,
from its early inception, has really just been a bunch of entrepreneurial minded, self motivated folks putting themselves out there and just building cool stuff. you don't need to wait for somebody to give
Right.
you a cool idea to build stuff and be a software engineer. You can go ahead and have a good idea and build it now. And it's really just comes down to how you market it, just how you mentioned, Courtney. So in the closing
Right.
minutes here, I do want to give you an opportunity to give a shout out to any people, services, tools, anything that you feel like really helped you be successful in your job search when you were breaking into the field. And then we'll wrap up.
Yeah. So I will say that I went to Prime Digital Academy. It's a place right here in Minnesota. They do have some online courses that are, evenings and weekends, so that if you're a working person, you can change your career. Um, and so I really love that experience. I also went there using the vet tech program, which I know sounds like I went and got my vet tech license. Not the same. It's through the VA, the Veterans Administration. They have a veteran technology sort of way to pay your way through a boot camp. So if you are a veteran or a dependent of a veteran, even a spouse, you can use that, and that can help you change your careers as well. And finally, I'd just say something as simple as a job scan, right? Going in, putting the job that you're looking at and your resume and seeing the word count and knowing, hey, that's not going to get past a bot. Sometimes something as simple as that to say, hey, I need someone to help me wordsmith this a little bit better. Because there are a lot of bots out there that are just going to fling your resume off the table. It's never going to get to a recruiter or a manager until you hit the right word count. So knowing how to phrase it better and get past the bots is a good
Yep.
first step.
Job scan, to speak that specifically, the part that I want to highlight the most is really it helps identify gaps in your resume. Now, I know you mentioned the job scans, specifically word count getting rejected. Actually, from what I understand, is that most recruiters don't use the AI scan tool, so most resumes are still seen by human being. But something like job scan will definitely give you an understanding of how well it compares to the job description, so how well you're going to stand out against other applicants. So definitely still a useful tool. Well, Courtney,
Yeah.
thank you so much for hopping on. I really appreciate being able to talk to you and share your story. That's all the time we have for today. So we will see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to the Junior Jobs Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please remember to like and subscribe, as that helps us reach more developers in need. And don't forget to check the show notes for details on today's sponsor and other job search services that we provide.